good evening to everyone. Thank you for tuning in to Teaching for the Culture, and this is the Whole Child with my special guest, Kimberly. How you doing today?
I am hanging in there, doing as well as I can over here. I enjoy being at home though. So
Me too. I'm enjoying it. I'm just twirling in my chair like,
I did have to venture out today to go to the store, however, and it was quite an adventure. I was ready to get back home after that. So yeah, I don't plan on doing that too many more times. Okay.
mm-mm, I'm good. As long as I'm home, I'm good. I'm one of those type of people. I don't like talking to a whole bunch of people. I'm just in my own little world. But so for those of you that's tuning in, this is the Whole Child series where we're talking about getting to the root, addressing trauma, generational curses. And today we're talking about the prison, the pipeline. And so I want to give the floor to Kimberly because so she could wrap up what happened the last episode.
Oh goodness. So last episode, I'm like brain cells, come back, come back. So last episode, we definitely were talking about the prison to pipeline, what it is, school to prison pipeline, what it is,
Mm-hmm.
how it manifests, when it starts, right? So it starts as early as preschool, and really thinking about how we should advocate for our students in order to break that cycle. Prior to that, we had talked about restorative practices. So that continues to come up about restorative practices and social emotional learning and why we need to do this series of talking about the whole child, because there are so many things that we miss when we
Mm-hmm.
are only focusing on instruction. So making sure that we're also focusing on the social and emotional development of our kids. So today we are going to kind of talk about the gender differences, because there are some significant differences between boys and girls, and then also how the system of school impacts them. But then also, parents here in Tampa, we just found out that we're out of school until April 15th. Tag your it. So, we definitely want to make sure that we give some actual strategies that you'll be able to use while you have your kiddos at home, and some things that you can do. So, we're going to try to open up those communication lines so that you're really able to see why behind what we do, and give you some actual actionable steps that you'll be able to use to help your kids, and do a better job with them during this homeschool that you weren't expecting.
Yeah. And I want to give a shout out to Mr. Henry Shea Washington. He's joined on to the Whole Child. So shout out to you. And I hope all is well and you and your family are staying safe out there. And everyone else, I hope that y'all are staying safe out there and staying inside and social distancing, folks. It's a real thing. Let's try it.
It is a thing. It is a thing. So I am just over here sharing so I can make sure people know about it. So I'll ask, as you all are watching, that you share as well, because again, we're in this together, y'all. We are community. We got. So we want to make sure we get as many community members, parents, teachers into the room as possible, so that we can have this very important discussion
Hmm.
tonight. So that's why I keep looking off, because I'm trying to get over here on this phone and see I got my spectacles on so that I can see what is happening here. The closer I get to 40, the closer these eyes be doing the most. So, so I'm trying to get it together. Okay, I'm almost done. Here I go. Here I go. All right. And we are shared. Okay. So you ready?
I'm ready. I'm
Unpack.
ready to go.
Okay, cool. So, at the top, we kind of just wanted to talk about some things, some common situations that happen with our kids. Last show, we mentioned again that this whole school to prison pipeline is the system that is put in place to take our kids disenfranchise our kids, if you will, or push them out of school, give them an encounter with the juvenile justice system, later with the justice system, to groom them for prison, right? So it's a whole like systematic situation that happens. And we were talking about last show, like how kids get suspended from preschool, and the types of things that can get a kid suspended from preschool are very interesting. So I pulled some statistics just for the sake of activating our background knowledge. So the label that Black students get more than any other student is that Black students are troublemakers, right? And they did
Mhm.
some research with some educators, some early childhood educators, and asked them to watch videos of kids doing normal kid behavior. What they told them is that you're going to watch this video and you may or may not see some problematic behavior. Whenever you see problematic behavior, go ahead and press this button when you see that problematic behavior. Well, what they saw is that there 42%, there was a rate of 42% of Black students exhibiting problematic behavior. However, the behavior wasn't problematic. It was just normal, everyday kid behavior, right? So
Mm.
their implicit bias got in the way of what they were looking at. So when we're talking about implicit bias, that's what you think about a particular subgroup or particular type of person that characterizes your actions. So because you think that, then you are looking for confirmations, if you will, to whatever it is that you think. So when we're looking at preschool statistics, even though Black students only make up 18% of the population, they're suspended from preschool at a rate of 42%, whereas
Wow.
white students who make up 43% of the population are only suspended at a rate of 28%. So Black students make up a much smaller portion of those who are in preschool, but they account for almost half of the suspension rate, which is very interesting. Also, Black schoolers are labeled more aggressive with malicious intentions than their white counterparts. So I see April Cobb is on, and she said that it's perspective and it is based on cultural norms. Yes. So something that we know about school is that school is geared towards white middle class society, right? White middle class norms, just school as a system. School also favors girls, and we'll talk about that in just a little while. So again, we're talking about preschool here. We're talking about 3 and 4 year olds, that with 3 and 4 year
Mhm.
olds, that they are already, the Black students are already being labeled as more aggressive, more malicious intent. And because of that, they are getting suspended at a higher rate than their white counterparts. Well, there was another study that was done, and it talked about facial expression. So these people were asked to look at different facial expressions of adult people, so Black, white adults. And what they noticed is that Black faces were 4.12 times more likely to be incorrectly labeled as angry than those of white faces, which I think
Wow.
is very interesting, right? So especially for my Black women that may be watching, we have something that is often called the RBF. Y'all know what that means? You heard of that before, Bianca?
Mm-mm.
So it's a resting BITCH face. So
Oh.
people might walk up to you and they'll say, it can't be that bad, smile, whatever. And you're like, I
Yeah.
was just thinking about, I gotta go buy groceries. Like, but that's just
Right.
your face, right? But what research has shown us is that, again, we're 4.12 times more likely to be characterized as angry as opposed to anything else, as opposed to sad, as opposed to melancholy, as opposed to whatever, sad, surprise, like any other feeling. They hit us with the angry
Yeah.
more often. So again, this trickles down on our kids as well, that they are more likely characterized to be angry. So again, I saw that April Cobb said that most of our teachers are white women and administrators are white men. Yes. So again, when we talk about the norms of school, that school is based in the system of white middle class society, right? And not understanding the cultural nuances of a person of color, then again, this is how we get painted into this box, this angry box, this aggressive box, this what is a disrespectful box, right? This is how we get painted into that because what we're doing is being misinterpreted. Whereas when we look at another person of color, then we are not really thinking that they're angry. I don't walk around thinking that people are angry because I know what my face looks like, right? So we
Right.
just kind of give the benefit of the doubt, like, hey, what's up? You good or not? Like, we just kind of go from there. Um, so the other thing, the third thing that I want to talk about before we kind of break it up is talking about adultification.
Mm.
So, adultification is when youth are prematurely and often inappropriately exposed to adult knowledge and assume extensive adult roles and responsibilities within their family network. This also comes into play when you are talking about youth not being able to be youth because they are looked at as adults. So if you
Mhm.
think about Tamir Rice, for instance, a 12-year-old boy who was playing with a toy, but he lost his life because he was viewed as a man. If you think about Trayvon Martin, right, the pictures that were put out of him were in this hoodie to appear as a thug, but he actually had just a cute little baby face, right? So it's removing the childhood innocence from kids of color. Um, and it is the norm, removing the childhood innocence from kids of color and treating them as adults, which again helps to support the school to prison pipeline. Because when you have this kid that comes, right, they're kid in age, but they may be, tall, whatever, however they look, but because they've been painted to be an adult, then it makes it that much easier to label them as an adult and to sentence them as an adult because they look like an adult, even though in age they are a kid, right?
Right.
Whereas we know with our white people, they are often, you think about it, they usually get some type of mental support. So they usually say, oh, they must have a mental illness, or oh, they must have been bullied, or what have you. Whereas the narrative with us is, oh, they were aggressive, they were mad, this is a pattern, blah 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 blah. So tonight we want to kind of disrupt some of those patterns and talk a little bit about the nuances again between girls and boys and what we can do as a community, but also again, parents, now that you have your kids, some of the things that you can do to help to break these stigmas. So you want to go first with the girls, Bianca, or you want me to go with the boys?
Yeah, let's do the girls. So,
Okay.
um, when I used to do my internship at the University of North Florida in Jacksonville, I used to work with our girls and I used to work with the fourth and fifth grade girls because the studies show that they are more likely, more often than not, to be introduced to the prison to pipeline in that elementary period. And so I would work and try to mentor the girls. And I did a whole study in regards to that. And what a lot of people have misconceptions, they always think when it comes to discipline, they always just think it's the black boys. But
Mm-hmm.
the studies show that black girls will receive a more severe punishment than a black boy.
Mm-hmm.
So much so, I actually want to show you guys this data right here that says from the arrest. Okay, so you have black girls, they're 4 times more likely to be arrested than white girls. Like, this
Mm-hmm.
is facts, this is statistics, and this is something that is taking place. And so when we go and we're talking about the prison to pipeline, a lot of times we have these nuances, and kind of like how you were saying about, when we have this adultification where we are talking about, girls, we also label them as aggressive and they're
Mm-hmm.
acting fast and,
Mm-hmm.
all of these things, but you're not really trying to get to the root. You're not trying to listen to their story to
Right.
figure out why they are who they are.
Mm-hmm.
And instead of that, what we do is we put labels and we have implicit bias. And what literally, there's a lot of teachers that are misdiagnosing children.
Mm-hmm.
And that's dangerous and that's borderline child abuse because you're not giving the children the resources for that. And April Cobb asked a good question as far as what does that data look like for HCPS? And I'm glad that you asked that because that's something that I'm actually working on. It's a personal project of mine.
Mhm.
and pulling the data. So I have the discipline data, and I have where it's broken down to girls and boys. So I'm going to actually be doing the statistics to actually
Love it.
create a pie chart to show based on the discipline data right here in Hillsborough County, which how does that work? So that's a really
Mhm.
good question. But
'Cause we know
our
our
children,
students of color are being disciplined at a harsher rate, but we don't have that data yet by gender.
yeah,
Mhm.
it's there. It's there. And it's one of those things where we don't have the data to say what their punishment is, but we do have the data that shows how many girls were suspended and how many boys were suspended. But we don't have like what was their actual consequence or
Mm,
what qualifies as a suspension. Because
mhm.
there are some girls that will be, suspended 10 days for fighting, but then when boys fight, they only get 2 days and come back to school.
Mhm.
And those variables there, it's just hard. You know what I mean? And it's just our kids deserve so much better. And our young girls need to stop having that implicit bias to say that, oh, they're fast or they have an attitude problem or they're lazy, oh, they don't want to work. And all of that is just trauma for the kids. When you
Mhm.
continue to put that notion and putting that into their brain, then that's something that, they just are really receptive to that.
Mhm. I was gonna when you talked about them being fast. So we talked off air about how that is a trigger, right?
Mhm.
And the reason is because there's something behind that, right? So there's a reason why this girl is seeking sexual pleasure, right, at such a young age. Usually they've been violated. So when we go back to our very first show, when we were talking about those ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, that one of the traumas that our kids encounter are sexual traumas. So
Mhm.
instead of us trying to unpack and figure out what's going on with her and why she is seeking that type of attention or why she's seeking that type of pleasure and really helping her to build her self esteem, we just label her as fast. So then
Yeah.
what that does is if something else happens, then the perpetrator can say, "Oh, well she wanted it."
Yeah.
She wanted it because she's grown. You know, these girls out here, when I think about Centoya Brown, we had one time we had a training and we had to unpack we were talking about sex trafficking and we had to unpack Centoya Brown's story. And there were educators in the room who actually said, well, these girls look so old. So I mean, how was he supposed to
Wow.
know? And we're thinking to ourselves, if you're talking to a 15-year-old child, like that you're talking to a 15-year-old child. Like I don't care if they sit up here talking about they're 19, where you're talking to a
You know.
15-year-old child.
Mhm.
So how can you then say, oh, this 15, she's still 15,
Mhm.
regardless of whether she's walking around grown, whether she got on booty shorts or not, like she's still 15. So we again become so desensitized to what's going on because we allow this adultification to happen. And then we just say, oh, well, she's fast. And then we just throw it away. So now we don't have to worry about her.
Yeah. And Cobb had said something where in most cases I don't feel that teachers are misdiagnosing. I believe that they don't know based on their lack of knowledge about, children of color. And so I go back to this like, in I do believe that teachers, there's some that just don't understand, they do not have the culture relevancy. And just like if a doctor did not know all the facts and they then present something, they are misdiagnosing.
Diagnosis.
And
Yeah.
so I know that at the end of the day, I know it, and it goes back to intentions. I know that sometimes some teachers do not intend
Mm-hmm.
to target or to misdiagnose children, but that's because they have implicit bias. It's because of their
Mm-hmm.
belief system. As a whole, it's multifaceted.
Mm-hmm.
But we have to get back to the root, and that's talking about, okay, how can we impact this child? What resources can we provide for this child instead of discounting them and
Mm-hmm.
saying that they have an attitude, they have a problem? And that's what happens with our Black girls, is that they are pushed out. And so, like, There is a phenomenal book, and it's The Push Out, and it talks
Mhm.
about the criminalization of Black girls in schools. I highly suggest anyone to read this book, to really understand the gravity of the situation. That our Black girls, they feel some type of way, and if you see what's happening on social media with our Black girls in social media is a whole nother topic,
Yeah.
where they constantly feel like they have to validate themselves because they're watching things that invalidate them. Oh,
Mhm.
you have to be a certain skin color to be beautiful. Oh, you have to not say nothing in class. You can't be too smart in school because you're gonna outshine everyone else. Like this is like real things that our children are being programmed, and a lot of our children are like kind of like, okay, I know the answer, but I'm not gonna raise my hand and say anything
Mhm.
because I don't want to appear something and then I be bullied when I leave the classroom. Like this is
Right.
this is real things that our children
Yeah.
deal with.
Yeah. So one of the things that we can do, right, because we're talking to you about the problem, but then the question is what can we do in order to help our girls? So one of the things that I'm personally is I have a mentoring group for middle school girls. So like grades 5 through 9 pretty much is the target. And we hold girls retreats for them. And the retreat is all about giving them self-esteem and building up their
Mhm.
self-esteem, right? So I know we all saw like the little girl who was just all over the internet when she looked in the mirror, she was getting her hair done or looked in the phone and she called herself ugly. This is
Mhm.
not uncommon. I know some of us that are watching can also relate to that. You may have had that time as a child or even as an adult. So we have to be really intentional about affirming our girls and being very
Yes.
intentional about what we choose to focus on when we are affirming them, right? So we know that skin color is an issue. We know that hair is an issue. Individualization, anything that makes them different, right, becomes an issue. Teaching our girls to become comfortable with standing out, teaching them that
Mhm.
they have a unique purpose. And because they have a unique purpose, everybody's not going to like you. And that's okay. Because that's how special you are, that everybody can't be around you. But it takes time and it takes consistency and truly affirming our girls to let them know that. So when we have our retreats, we first do yoga with our girls because we want to teach them mindfulness and we want to get them to a place of where their spirits are open to receive what we're saying. And then we actually have
Mhm.
them write down all of the ugly things that someone has called them. When someone told them that they weren't good enough, or the things that kind of just stay in their minds, right? Um, so we do that to get that out into the air, and then we teach them how to affirm each other and how to affirm themselves, because our self-talk is often very negative as well, because we've listened to whoever has said whatever, and now we're repeating that back to ourselves. So it's something that's learned, and it's a process that we go through. And yes, I would love to be able to say that parents do need to do a better job, and that's why we are doing this, right? But
Mhm.
it's a community effort, right? So it's not just the parents, it's any adult that comes into contact with these girls. So I usually try to make it a point when I go somewhere that sometimes I have a count. So I'll have like a number and I'll be like, okay, today is 4. So I'm going to find 4 girls and I'm just going to say, hey, you are so beautiful. Just out the blue, just some random girl in the store, just because I always want to be in the habit of complimenting girls and building them up and affirming them, because you never know what their spirit is craving. So I kind of just let my
Mhm.
spirit guide how I'm going to do that. But the response that you get from that is like, thank you. Many
Mhm.
don't know how to take a compliment. So they immediately downplay themselves. So they'll say, "Oh, this is no, ma'am. No, just say thank you. Just say that." Even
Mhm.
that is a skill that we have to teach, right? So again,
Yes.
parents, when you have your girls at home, this is something you can be doing at home, talking to them about how they feel about themselves, talking to them about what makes them so special and unique and important, talking to them
Mhm.
about the goals that they have and the skills that they have and how much of a hard worker that they are. So really finding ways to affirm them consistently so that they're able to hear a new self-talk going on in their minds.
Yeah. Because if you don't do it, there's a whole bunch of grown men on these social media apps that
Yep.
will and that are doing it today in
Yep.
Tampa, in St. Pete, wherever you live at. It's happening. It's a real thing, and our children are they're in danger if you don't speak to your children and you don't have conversations. Not just parents, but if you don't talk to children and uplift them, then it's just something where we have to develop ways. And even at the school, for a solution, schools have to develop ways to make our girls feel safe at school,
Mm-hmm.
period.
No.
And if we don't have them feeling safe at school and they're always guarded and they're always on their toes and they're always in survival mode in that environment, well, then anything could trigger them. And then now you're disciplining them for them being triggered on something, and that's
Right.
unresolved trauma. And
Right.
it compounds and it just continues to happen. It's a vicious cycle if you don't stop it and get to the root.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it really is. So yes, Denise says speak life. It is. I actually used to put that in my emails when I would send out emails advocating for students. I would say, and please continue to speak life into them, even though they have not yet developed into the person that you expect them to be. Please continue to speak life because there's power in speaking life over kids. And this is
Mhm.
something that's free. This doesn't cost you anything. You don't have to go buy any resources to do it. All you have to do is speak life and speak positively, right? And I don't feel like that's too much to ask of us, of all of us doing that collectively.
Yeah.
And just speaking like the culture in Tampa. I'm not from Tampa, I'm from New Orleans, and things are very different in New Orleans. But just in the time that I've spent in Tampa over the past 17 years, um, women in Tampa are not good at that. We're not good at affirming each other and complimenting each other and helping each other to win. So that's a place where we can grow collectively. So
Yeah.
that's just a small thing that we can do with our girls. Again, while we have them during this time, while we're not at school, this is a small thing that we can do with girls that we come into contact with.
Yeah.
So I do want to shift over to the boys right quick. So as you mentioned, that usually we think about when we think about discipline and we think about suspensions and all that, we think about the boys. And boys are there, you know,
Mhm.
just just girls, black girls have taken over what used to just be black boys, right? Getting the brunt of everything. But we do know that our Black boys receive the highest rates of D's and F's in school. Our Black boys are the highest, they're the highest percentage of student that are represented in your ESC special ed population. And our Black boys are characterized as aggressive and scary. Again, when we go back to that adultification,
Mhm.
our Black boys, you know, people are clutching their purses and all of that because the perception is that they are these scary men, when in fact they are little boys just looking for somebody to love them and to notice them.
Yeah.
So I mentioned earlier that school is set up for girls to be successful. So one of the gurus in gender-based research. So full disclosure, I went to an all-girls high school and I loved it. Every moment of it. Like I would not trade my experience for the world because they really were able to focus on the way that girls learn, and they were really able to focus on the relationship skills that we needed as girls that needed to be built. School as a system is set up for girls to be successful. So Michael Gurian is the guru on gender-based research, and one of his books is Boys and Girls Learn Differently. But he has a whole like institute um, of things, and Farrell Girls Academy and Franklin Boys Preparatory Academy. They both institute these gender-based strategies. So
Mhm.
one thing we know about boys is that boys need to be active, right? If you think about your boys that you have at home, your nephew, your little cousin, whomever, your brother, right? They may have been all over the place from jump. This is normal boy behavior, right? They are just doing the
Mm-hmm.
most, right? They are they're geared towards things that move. So if something moves in the room, they're gonna find it. If something can be thrown in the room, they're gonna find it. They are not gonna sit down and be quiet. And school as a system is set up for you to sit down and be quiet. That's something that girls usually do, boys, not so much, right? So we really have to learn how to teach our boys and how to create an environment where they can be successful and where they're able to redirect their energy. So, as much as I do work with girls, I'm actually a boys teacher. So, when I taught science, I taught high school physical science in 8th grade, and I had the opportunity to have an all boys class. So it's 22 boys, and I was
Wow.
the only girl. I was like, I'm taking all the girls out of here, and it's just gonna be us, right? But there was not a quiet day in my class ever, right? They were up, they were moving around, they were tapping, like all of this is stuff that boys do. I don't care. I don't care if you're in the back of the classroom standing on your head. I do not care. Did you hear what I said? And can you answer these questions when I ask you to answer? Like, that's all that is important. So, having flexible seating, having clipboards for them, having an opportunity for them to get up when they need to in order to redirect that energy. One of the things that research has shown us is that in preschool and elementary school with our boys, one of the consequences that they get is taking away their recess. So what you think they're gonna do with all that energy? The whole point of recess is for them to get the energy out. So then you
Right.
take them out of recess, or you don't let them go to PE, and now what you think they're gonna do with the energy? They're gonna use
Yeah.
it in the classroom. There is nothing else to do with it, right? So giving them an actual
Mhm.
outlet to be able to get their energy out. And when they get the energy out, then they are more focused, right? So something you can
Mhm.
do with boys is work with them in 10-minute increments, right? So we teach for 10 minutes and then do some jumping jacks, do some push-ups, do something active for about 2 minutes, then sit down and focus for 10 minutes. 2 minutes, 10 minutes, right? And this way, it continues to get the oxygen flowing in their brains, and it continues to give them an outlet for that energy, as opposed to penalizing them for something that makes them who they are.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Oh yeah. And now with social media and the way that, the kids constantly get these alerts and push notifications, it even makes it even worse. Where
Hmm.
there's studies that show that children have a difficulty concentrating.
Hmm.
There's a study that shows that an adult, if they receive an alert on their phone, it takes them 30 minutes to
Yep.
refocus. So
Hmm.
just imagine an adolescent brain that hasn't fully developed and they're getting these TikTok notifications, these, iMessage notifications, and their phone is going off left and right, left and right. Well,
Hmm.
I mean, are they going to be able to focus? That one text message, that's the whole class period. Done,
Right.
gone.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. But what I will say is that they will sit still for what is important to them. So if
Hmm.
you all think about this Fortnite that came out, right? It just came out of nowhere, right? And all of a sudden the kids were like, I'm playing the Fortnite. Like everything is Fortnite. They're up at 2 and 3 in the morning playing the Fortnite. They're doing the Fortnite dance, right? They will sit there for that stuff because they're interested in it. So if we can create that same type of dynamic when we're teaching them, they will sit there if they're
Hmm.
interested for it, right? So it's really about making it interesting, but then also adding those different dynamics to it so that they feel like it's a game. So if for instance, if you have kids, boys that are constantly throwing things across the room, right? So that was a rule in my classroom. We don't throw things unless I tell you to, right? But I see that y'all keep trying to throw the paper into the daggone trash can, right? Cool. Guess what we about to do? Today, we're playing a quiz
Hmm.
bowl. And when you get the answer right, then you could throw the paper into the trash can. We just made it a game,
Yep.
but you still giving me what I need, right? So it's really just a way to use what it is that they normally would do and hooking them into the learning so that they can do that. So again, parents, when you have them at home, do not expect that they're going to sit there for 2 and 3 hours on virtual school. That is not what's about to happen. I just really want you to know, right?
No.
So again, 10, 15 minutes at the most sitting, get up and do something. 15 minutes, Get up and do something, right? And that's how you're going to keep them engaged. But it has to be consistent. You have to give them that time to, again, get the energy out, because otherwise our boys are not going to do it. And what we also know is about our girls that live in poverty, a lot of their brains are wired like boys,
Mm-hmm.
so sometimes they need to be active as well. So, oh, can you pull up the because before I show them that resource, the one that has the strengths and weaknesses? Okay, so I brought this graphic up because when we talked about the way that our kids are viewed, it's really important for us to understand that there is a positive and negative connotation in name for every type of behavior. Okay, so if you think about on the right side, we have supposed weaknesses, right? So you think about a student that is, let's go to number six, for instance. So, number six, a lot of our kids may present themselves as emotionless or feel looking as if they're devoid of feeling, right? Another way to put on that is that they're just calm and laid back. Or if you go to number nine, where a kid seems very reckless, very irresponsible, they just do things when they mind tell them to do it. But another way to look at that is that they're adventurous and that they're courageous to take a risk. Or if we go to number four, inconsistent, right? They're not sticking with one particular thing. We could also call that being flexible and adaptable. So these are just some examples of the way that we call behaviors in a negative sense, but we could actually put a positive spin on them and reshape the way that we're talking to our kids about their behavior, right? So if I see that, if in my mind it's telling me that you're rebellious, for instance, like in number 11, well, I could take that rebellion, that supposed rebellion, and turn you into an activist and a revolutionary, because what it tells me is that you're not going to settle for the status quo and that you want to do something different. Okay, well, let me teach you how to do that. Thanks, Bianca. So we really have to be super intentional about reframing the way that we label our kids, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
society, school, the world will label them in the most negative way that they possibly can. But for every single thing, when they say that a kid is defiant and a rule breaker, that same kid is super creative and an out of the box thinker. So as a parent, when you're going to conferences or when you're talking to teachers and they're saying, oh, well, they just don't ever follow the rules and blah, blah, blah. And then you can counter and say, yeah, because he's an out of box thinker. She's super creative and super flexible. And they're going to sit there and look at you because they're not used to thinking about Black and brown bodies in a positive light. So we have to really arm ourselves with the way to reshape those types of behaviors so that we can bring out the positive characteristics, so that we can speak life into our kids as
Mm-hmm.
opposed to the world telling them that they're not good enough or that something is wrong. So the other thing that we can do is what I urge you all to do is what's called a BART survey. So we're going to share my screen here so that we can see what this is. So VARC basically stands, it's a learning style inventory. So over on the right here, you see that VARC is visual, oral, which is listening with your ears, read, write, and kinesthetic. So visual means that I learn through seeing. Oral means I learn through hearing. Read, write means I learn through reading and writing. And kinesthetic means I learn through doing. So what you can do, this is an electronic BARC survey, and we'll put the link into the comments for you all so that you'll be able to access it. But basically what you can do is go through this survey with your kid, and they'll just answer some of these questions. So for instance, this says a website has a video showing how to make a graph. There's a person speaking some lists and words describing what to do in some diagrams. Would you learn most from reading the words, seeing the diagrams, watching the actions, or listening? Or you want to plan a surprise party for a friend. Would you talk about it on the phone, make lists of what to do and what to buy for the party, draw a map, or invite friends and just let it happen? So when you go through and you submit it, it will take you to different strategies. So, on the different strategies, it tells you different things that you can do. For instance, if you are a visual learner, for instance, so it tells you the best way that they learn. So people with a visual preference prefer to draw things. They work with plans and maps. They like to use color. They take in information through pictures, through books with diagrams. They need to highlight things. They use different fonts. They underline, they text mark. When they are presenting information to other people, they may create a flow chart or a diagram, right? So, and it also gives like some studying tips. So, in education, for instance, if you're a visual learner, you should convert your notes into a learnable package by reducing each 3 pages down to 1 page. So, that might look like taking a whole bunch of words and turning those words into a diagram. Or even in the workplace, because this applies to adults as well, you may create symbols, or you may make each page of your report look different, right? So when you're utilizing this tool, it'll really give you some strategies that you can use for how best to help your type of learner. So I suggest that you take it. I suggest that your kid take it. So that you'll be able to really think about what types of activities that you want to do with them, and understand how they process information and how you process information. So for instance, and I'll tell you why this is important. So I'm an oral learner. I learn by hearing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when I am sitting in a meeting, for instance, I'm rarely looking at the presenter. I'm usually coloring is what I'm usually doing. Or kind of doodling on the side of the page, but I'm listening the whole time, because in order for me to take in information, I have to be able to hear. Right now, if there's a whole bunch of side talk and side chatter and all this kind of stuff, I can't deal. I'll be like, hey, y'all need to, because I can't hear. I need to hear.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Whereas other people, for instance, who are visual learners, they need a PowerPoint. So they need to see what you're talking about. So you're giving them all these verbal instructions, and they're like, I don't know what you said. Where's the PowerPoint? What slide we on, right? Because they need to see what's going on. So if you know how you learn and you know how the child learns, then we avoid a whole lot of frustration and thinking that they're being disrespectful because they're not looking at you, but they're listening to you, right? Because you understand
Mm-hmm.
how they process information. If they're a kinesthetic learner, you may be trying to explain something to them. Okay, so first you're gonna do, and then you do, and they're like, "Can I just do it? Like, can you just stop talking to me and just let me do it?" Because they're
Mm-hmm.
kinesthetic. They learn through doing. So they're not trying to be disrespectful. They're trying to honor their learning style. But if you don't know their learning style, then you get all up in your feelings and you like, you being just, no, they're just trying to
Well,
advocate for themselves. And they don't know what to call it, but they know how they learn.
it's all about learning a child's story.
Yes. Yes. So that's just one type of tool that we can use in order to get to know our kids better, but also to get to know you better. Because you may find that you haven't been honoring your own learning style, and you might be frustrated because you're not honoring your own learning style. I know I find that out a lot when I'm sitting in meetings. Whew. I'm like, this could have been an email, because this
Mm-hmm.
is not helping me right now, right? Um,
Right.
so yeah, so just a few things that we can do. Cobb says schedule a few days to come teach me. I can do that, ma'am. I sure can. So yeah, so do y'all have any questions, comments, anything at all? Yeah, she said there was a time where students, the district would push that. Yes, I don't know what happened with that, but it's still very relevant, right? So, and there are lots of different types. So there are learning style inventories, there are personality style inventories, communication
Mm-hmm.
inventories. They all just add layers to understanding how you process information, how you take in information, how you perceive information to be given and taken. So I am a firm proponent of learning style inventories. I actually just do them for fun because they make me happy inside. But you don't have to be a nerd like me. But I do recommend them because they are really useful. And again, I feel like it helps to avoid miscommunication. That doesn't need to be there because you truly get an understanding of the other person that you're dealing with. And that is super important when we're
Mhm.
talking about education. So, what we
I
think.
love it. It's just like it's so mind blowing because when you think about it, it's like it all makes sense, and it's like it could just be so simple.
Hmm.
It could be so simple if we are intentional with what we're doing and we're listening to the teachers. And, so when teachers have all of these different, people in their classroom that they're trying to accommodate, I hear some of the teachers' perspective. Well, it's difficult to touch all these children because I have so many kids in the classroom. And that's because you got politics of people who, never been in the classroom that say, hey, yeah, 30 kids could be in your classroom and everything is okay, everything's fine. But we have to kind of be intentional and kind of get back to the basics of let's reaching the child, the whole child,
Yeah.
and what is it that worked for them. And we talk about all the different type of learning styles, but we have one standardized test. Just help me.
Mhm. Mhm. It doesn't make sense. So thank goodness this year there won't be any standardized tests. Which I feel like kind of shows that we really don't need to rely so heavily on them in the first place. Go figure. That
Hmm,
we can just get rid
go
of it.
figure.
But to your point of how all of this stuff, if we're doing what's right for kids, y'all, like I feel like we say this all the time, Bianca. We just be like, can we just do what's right for the children? If
That's it.
we really think about reaching the whole child, right? So again, thinking about a learning style inventory in your mind, you might be like, how does that disrupt the school to prison pipeline? Because you are allowing these children to flourish, and now they don't get mislabeled, misdiagnosed, seen as disrespectful. Now you got kicked out. Now you get suspended. Now the resource officer get called. Now you in the school to prison pipeline. Like
That's it.
if we would just think about getting to the root of what's going on, so helping our kids deal with their trauma, honor what our kids are trying to say to us, because this is the thing, kids know when something is working for them and when it's not.
Hmm.
They just might not have the right words to tell you that. So when a kid says something like, hey, miss, this stupid, I ain't trying to do this, there's a reason that they're saying that. They don't feel like it's relevant. They don't feel like it applies to them. They don't understand it. Ask why. Instead of taking things personally, ask them what's going on.
Yes.
Why do you say that, my love? Why? Why do you feel like this is stupid? And wait for their answer. And they will guide you directly to what it is that they need. If we will just be open and listening to what they are telling us, instead of trying so quickly to just be like, get out, can't do it, nope, because we're so rigid and we're not willing to be flexible. If we are here for our kids, then we're going to do what it takes in order to reach our kids, period.
Yeah. And we have a different generation of children now, so we can't continue to go with this fixed mindset on
Mhm.
things. And that's why that growth mindset is really, really important. And to your point, when you were talking about how, teachers, misdiagnose children, well, some teachers misdiagnose themselves,
They
and
do.
they don't have the emotional intelligence and integrity to kind of dismiss everything that happened at home before they got
Right,
into the classroom.
right,
And then now, because they're upset on something personal that has nothing to do with the children, you are now hindering the learning of your children because you haven't unpacked what you are dealing with and
yeah,
what you are going through. And that's why with my whole op-ed, like my whole point was I refuse to go back into the classroom and be a toxic teacher
right, right.
because of what this is doing to me,
Mhm,
and then I'm taking it out on the kids. I
mhm.
just can't do that. But
Yeah,
not everyone has that choice. Sometimes it's for the money that they stay, or because of the health insurance that they stay. There's different
right.
factors. But if we're gonna get to the whole child, it's gonna take everyone getting to them whole selves first. and
Yeah,
and that self-love and learning how to
mm,
put things in compartments so that way you can deal with the child.
Yeah, you just made me think about something, and maybe we can do this on our next show, is going through the actual process of unpacking that stuff
Mm, that'd be
and really
good.
figuring out how to deal with our own stuff. Because if we can do that for us, then we can help our kids to do that, you
Yeah,
know. I did want to bring something up though that I totally forgot about, and this is called the opportunity myth. Have you heard of that before?
I have, and me and Cobb went there too.
Went to the opportunity myth, y'all talked about it?
Yeah, they had a presentation with Real Talk Coalition, and we went and they was talking about their study and what they were doing, and you know
Mhm.
how some of our kids, they're not even getting quality work, and if they're not getting quality work, then how do you expect them? You're not setting accountability and higher standards for them, and you got children in eighth, ninth grade doing fourth grade level work,
Yeah,
and then you then want to hold them to the standard at the
yeah,
end, and it's just a rat race that
yeah.
doesn't make sense.
So what made me think about it is Cobb's comment where she said they're entering middle school performing on a primary level, and how does that happen? The reason that it happens, so for those of you who may not know, so the opportunity myth is basically, let's say in a middle school classroom, like you see a kid for an hour a day, right? About 50 minutes, 55, 47, whatever, but about an hour a day for a particular content area. So that's 180 hours of instruction that they will receive in a year because we have 180 days of school. Okay. The opportunity myth says that at 100, out of 180 hours of opportunity, that 133 of those hours is spent on below grade level work.
Mm,
So that leaves only 47 hours of actual grade level access to work. So, what that equates to is spending 6 months of the year on stuff that is not at grade level. And then in the fourth quarter, now we're like, oh, you in eighth grade? Let me give you an eighth grade text. But the whole time you've been doing fourth grade text.
no,
How you expect them to jump over to eighth grade when you haven't been scaffolding them up? So,
there we
what
go.
we have to do, parents, one, is ask questions about what are our kids actually getting, right? Just ask the questions. But as educators, we have to give them the opportunity to even do the work. So, we don't know if they could do it because you never even gave them a chance.
Yeah,
They never even had a chance to do it. So we can't, how are we assessing you? How are we saying that you got this A in what? Fourth grade again? And you in eighth grade? Because I haven't given you a chance to do eighth grade. It's it's mind blowing, but it is rooted in low expectations. And it's rooted in the fact that our teachers, some of our teachers, don't expect that Black and brown kids can achieve. They don't think they can. Therefore, they don't give them the opportunity to show that they can because they don't think that they can. And to Cobb's point about allowing them to struggle and grapple, they do need to struggle and grapple. They do. Now, we don't make
mhm.
it so hard that they can't do it, right? That's when we provide supports for them to access it. But how are they ever going to get there if they never see it? They got to.
But and to Cop's point, and what she's saying is that how and I don't know if this is just a Hillsborough like Tampa thing, or is this a Florida, like I do believe that this is a Florida thing and beyond. But I do believe that what she's talking about is how, you know, we have people to evaluate, you know, the learning that's taking place, and because they don't understand these concepts, because you know they're in a different environment, they're in a different level, so they don't see what we see. They go in and they have different narratives, and they're going based off a rubric to then grade teachers and say, oh, well, if a child is struggling, then you're not teaching it right because they don't understand it.
Mhm.
And that's not necessarily the case. You have to give it to them so that they can grapple with it, so that they can problem solve, so
Correct.
that they can meet that goal.
Right.
But there's some, again, principals,
I know.
district admin that just have this implicit bias of what they're going to walk into in the classroom. And that is also a problem, which is why some teachers, when it comes time, they'll say, I'm going to give you something easy because I need to
Right.
go ahead and get this
Right.
observation going. And at the
Right.
end of the day, who does that harm? The
Right. The
children.
kid. Yeah, yeah. Trust me, I understand. When I was a mentor, I evaluated in classrooms, so I know the rubric backwards, forwards, inside and out. And what I can tell you about many of our administrators is they do not. They do not know the rubric. They don't know what it looks like. They are out here winging it, and that's unfortunate. Because again, it is our kids that are being harmed in it all, and that's some of the systemic things that needs to be undone, because just a teacher trying to save their job or to save their check, they want to make sure that they're successful. So in order for them to be successful, they have to lower the bar in order to be successful. That doesn't make sense. So
Yeah,
that's very backwards, right? So that kind of stuff has to be undone. So my encouragement is that we always do what's best for kids, and
there we
we
go.
think about who, if I'm, my philosophy is, if I'm doing right by my kids, then I'm knocking it out the park. If I'm doing right by my kids, I can articulate that. I can talk about the why behind that. I can give you the breakdown of who learned what and how I know that they know it and what I'm about to do next and all of that and what they did yesterday and how that feeds into today. And I done gather my assessment data and they asking and answering questions and all. I'm an excellent educator. I don't care what you got to say. But I could do a whole live on that, and I
Yeah.
get in trouble sometimes, so I'll just stop there.
Hmm.
I'll just stop there
Don't
because
get in trouble. Don't get in trouble.
I don't want to
Mm-mm.
get in trouble. So we hope that you found tonight's informational
Don't do
and
it,
that
sis.
you have some strategies that you can implement while we are going through this whole virtual learning situation. This is something that you can assign to your kids on SB and ask them to do it. I really feel like right now is a great time to focus on the whole child. So I feel like now is a great time to really teach our kids about mindfulness and, all of the strategies that we have with social emotional learning, character development, like help them to be better people and to cope with life. Now is the time. Like there's, and
Yeah.
I hate to say it like this, but there's no standardized test. So now is the time. We remove the whole I'm teaching to the test situation, and I really get to teach the child. Teach the
There we
child
go.
and do what's
That's
best
it.
for the child and teach them how to be amazing people and how to um, manage their emotions and all of this. This is stuff that's going to last longer than this year. This is preparing them for life.
Yeah. And
So
also too, parents and guardians and if y'all can just make sure y'all check the cell phone. I'm sorry, I just have to bring this
always,
up again. But during this time, I really if please focus on the whole child. Let them disconnect and tap
yes,
into them, because if they're not tapped into you and family, they're tapped into something. And I'm going to tell you that they're tapping to some crazy things on the cell phone, and there's some crazy things that's taking place. So if you guys can just have that mindfulness and making sure that our children are reading, and you're reading with
mhm,
your
yeah,
children and spending some quality time with your children, be intentional with your children, and community members, be intentional, ask children how they're doing. And I know we have social distancing, but a lot can go a long way just by being nice and being courteous and uplifting our children, because right now it's out of hand, and we got
yeah,
to do something to fix it, and we got to get back to the whole child.
yeah. Especially with so much time on their hands, like we need to be all up in these phones.
Yeah,
Yeah. So next show, let's do an activity. We can do an actual like SEL activity, and like I said, about self-care and how we process what's going on with us and what we do to ground ourselves. We That'll be fun.
that's
So
gonna be
let's do that
fun.
next
I'm gonna
show.
have, and
Yeah.
I'm gonna make sure I have my sage on deck and a
Yes.
coupon code for some sage. Blue Sage Boutique. I need a coupon code. I'm coming. I'm coming to you. But thank y'all for tuning in. And until next time, we'll be here in 2 weeks, and the episode will be on YouTube and the podcast very shortly.
Thanks for watching, y'all.
All right.